All right, good evening, everyone. We're back in Second Kings tonight, and tonight I don't know what best way to describe this other than this is maybe more of a history lesson, but there's several, as First and Second Kings is filled with. There's several events that happen throughout this that continue to show Elisha's. First Kings was all about Elijah. Second Kings about Elisha. Continue to show Elisha's prophetic guidance, so to speak, of the country, and we have the northern kingdom, we have the southern kingdom, we have the kings Jehoshaphat and of Judah, we have Ahab of Israel, while Elijah was the prophet, and the neighboring king of Anan, or Aram, was Ben-Hadad. And then we had, after Ahab was killed, Ahaziah became king of Israel, while Jehoshaphat still reigned in Judah. And then Joram and Jehoram, both names sounding the same there, king of Judah and king of Israel. And we get into where Hazael becomes king of Aram tonight. And so we're gonna start over in 2 Kings 8 and 7, but we're going to go between 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles tonight to kind of show what's going on in both nations at this time. But God, one thing to follow along here is God always keeps his promises, and that's true even until this very moment that we are here right now. God always keeps his promises. And what he says through the prophets that will come to pass, come to pass. And he delivers the promised judgment against those who oppose him, but yet he continues to preserve the lineage of King David throughout the story of Israel and Judah. And in 2 Kings 8, beginning in verse 17, Elisha went to Damascus, and Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, was ill. When the king was told the man of God has come all the way up here, he said to Hazael, "Take a gift with you and go to meet the man of God. Consult the Lord through him and ask him, 'Will I recover from this illness?'" And so Hazael went to meet Elisha, taking him as a gift 40 camel loads of all the finest wares of Damascus. He went in and stood before him, and he said, "Your son Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, has sent me to ask, 'Will I recover from this illness?'" Elisha answered, "Go and say to him, 'You will certainly recover.' Nevertheless, the Lord has revealed to me that he will in fact die." He stared at him with a fixed gaze until Hazael was embarrassed. And then the man of God, Elisha, began to weep. "Why is my Lord weeping?" asked Hazael. "Because I know the harm that you will do to the Israelites," he answered. "You will set fire to their fortified places, kill their young men with the sword, dash their little children to the ground, and rip open their pregnant women." Hazael said, "How could your servant, a mere dog, accomplish such a feat?" "The Lord has shown me that you will become king of Aram," answered Elisha. Then Hazael left Elisha and returned to his master. And when Ben-Hadad asked, "What did Elisha say to you?" Hazael replied, "He told me that you would certainly recover." But the next day he took a thick cloth, being Hazael, he took a thick cloth, soaked it in water, and spread it over the king's face so that he died. And then Hazael succeeded him as king. So Elisha prophesied what was going to happen, but he was torn because he knew what was going to happen under Hazael's reign of the nation. And back in, let's jump back over to, because God had already prophesied about Hazael that he would serve as king of Aram. And Hazael's rise to Aram's throne fulfilled God's promises, but it also brought a lot of pain and suffering to God's people. And you know, it's hard to imagine, we as humans today, that what God allowed to happen during this time in order to accomplish the perfect plan that he had. And you know, even when we can't understand God's plan, we can fully trust him. And he judged the Israelites and the cruel brutality that King Hazael inflicted on them, but the Israelites continued to reject God's kindness and continued to reject him as their God. But you know, as I mentioned, God had prophesied this, and let's read back in 1 Kings 19, verse 15, where this happened, and where the Lord said to him, "Go back the way you came and go to the desert of Damascus. And when you get there, anoint Hazael king over Aram. Also anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, king over Israel, and anoint Elisha, son of Japhat, from Abel-Meholah to succeed you as prophet. Jehu will put to death any who escaped the sword of Hazael, and Elisha will put to death any who escaped the sword of Jehu. Yet I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have bowed, who have not bowed down to Baal, and whose mouths have not kissed him." So this is where, back in 1 Kings, it was already told that that Hazael would become king of Aram. So, continuing in 2 Kings, back over in 2 Kings, chapter 8, verse 16. In the 5th year of Joram, son of Ahab, king of Israel, went with Jehoshaphat, or when Jehoshaphat was king of Judah, Joram, son of Jehoshaphat, began his reign as king of Judah. He was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 8 years. He followed the ways of the kings of Israel, as that house of Ahab had done, for he married a daughter of Ahab. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Nevertheless, for the sake of his servant David, and remember this, nevertheless, for the sake of his servant David, the Lord was not willing to destroy Judah. He had promised to maintain a lamp for David and his descendants forever. In the time of Joram, Edom rebelled against Judah and set up its own king. So Joram went to Zair with all his chariots. The Edomites surrounded him and his chariot commanders, but he rose up and broke through by night. His army, however, fled back home. To this day, Edom has been in rebellion against Judah. Libnah revolted at the same time. As for the other events of Joram's reign and all he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the king of Judah? Joram rested with his ancestors and was buried with them in the city of David. And Ahaziah, his son, succeeded him as king. In the 12th year of Joram, son of Ahab, king of Israel, Ahaziah, son of Joram, king of Judah, began to reign. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 1 year. His mother's name was Athaliah, a granddaughter of Omri, king of Israel. He followed the ways of the house of Ahab and did evil in the eyes of the Lord, as the house of Ahab had done, for he was related by marriage to Ahab's family. Ahaziah went with Joram, son of Ahab, to war against Hazael, king of Aram, at Ramoth Gilead. The Arameans wounded Joram, so King Joram returned to Jezreel to recover from the wounds the Arameans had inflicted on him at Ramoth in his battle with Hazael, king of Aram. Then Ahaziah, son of Joram, king of Judah, went down to Jezreel to see Joram, son of Ahab, because he had been wounded. Now let's jump over to 2 Chronicles 21, and starting in verse 1. Then Jehoshaphat rested with his ancestors and was buried with them in the city of David. And Joram, his son, succeeded him as king. Joram's brothers, the sons of Jehoshaphat, were Azariah, Jehiel, and Zechariah, Azariah, Michael, and Shephatiah. All those were sons of Jehoshaphat, king of Israel. Their father had given them many gifts of silver and gold and articles of value, as well as fortified cities in Judah. But he had given the kingdom to Joram because he was his firstborn son, which followed the tradition back then. When Joram established himself firmly over the father's kingdom, he put all his brothers to the sword along with some of the officials of Israel. So Joram went out and killed his brothers. And Joram was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 8 years. He followed the ways of the kings of Israel, as the house of Ahab had done, for he married a daughter of Ahab. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. Nevertheless, because of the covenant the Lord had made with David, the Lord was not willing to destroy the house of David. He had promised to maintain a lamp for him and his descendants forever. In the time of Joram, Edom rebelled against Judah and set up its own king. So Joram went there with his officers and all his chariots. The Edomites surrounded him and his chariot commanders, but he rose up and broke through by night. To this day, Edom has been in rebellion against Judah. Libnah revolted at the same time because Joram had forsaken the Lord, the God of his ancestors. He had also built high places on the hills of Judah and had caused the people of Jerusalem to prostitute themselves and had led Judah astray. Joram received a letter from Elijah the prophet, which said, "This is what the Lord, the God of your father David says. You have not followed the ways of your father Jehoshaphat or Asa, king of Judah, but you have followed the ways of the kings of Israel, and you have led Judah and the people of Jerusalem to prostitute themselves, just as the house of Ahab did. You have also murdered your own brothers, members of your own family, men who were better than you. So now the Lord is about to strike your people, your sons, your wives, with everything that is yours, with a heavy blow. You yourself will be very ill with the lingering disease of the bowels, until the disease causes your bowels to come out." The Lord aroused against Joram the hostility of the Philistines and of the Arabs, who lived near the Cushites. And they attacked Judah, invaded it, and carried off all the goods found in the king's palace, together with his sons and wives. Not a son was left to him except Ahaziah, the youngest. After all this, the Lord affected Joram with an incurable disease of the bowels. In the course of time, at the end of the 2nd year, his bowels came out because of the disease, and he died in great pain. His people made no funeral fire in his honor, as they had for his predecessors. Joram was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 8 years. He passed away to no one's regret and was buried in the city of David, but not in the tombs of the kings. And continuing in chapter 20, we'll stop there, 21:20. So in 2 Kings, starting in 2 Kings 8, verse 16, and 2 Chronicles 21, the spotlight now shifts to Judah and her kings. And, we traveled back a little bit of time in Elijah's ministry, and early in Joram's reign in Israel, Jehoshaphat's son Joram became king of Judah. And it's a little confusing because these names are very similar, and so it requires some attention as to just exactly who is who, and it's easy to get confused. But if remember back in the First Kings, when Jehoshaphat intermarried with Ahab's family, it brought on terrible consequences for him and for the people of Israel. And this alliance had a lot of damage, and it came to light early in Joram's reign. He murdered his brothers to secure the throne, and Joram reversed his father Jehoshaphat's spiritual desires, and because Jehoshaphat was following God, and he was following what God wanted them to do, and he did so for a considerable time. But now Joram reversed all that, and they went back to the idol worship, and he built high places, which God did not want. And but despite his unfaithfulness, despite Joram's unfaithfulness, God kept his promise, and he did not destroy the house of David. So wars characterized Joram's reign, but and then Joram, if you remember back, appealed to God, God appealed to Joram through the letter from Elijah the prophet. And Elijah foretold the suffering that they were going to have, and that the people would endure. And then Joram died an excruciating death. And I find it interesting when we read over in Second Chronicles that he passed away to no one's regret. And so he obviously was not a very popular king. But then Joram and Elithah's son succeeded him and continued to lead Judah into further wicked ways. And Ahaziah allied with Israel's king Joram in a battle against Hazael, and then Joram was wounded in battle and retreated to Jezreel in Israel to recover, and King Hazael visited him there. And it was there in Jezreel that the enemy seized the opportunity to kill Ahaziah and his relatives. But despite this, God's plan to preserve David's dynasty still was not destroyed. So now jumping over into 2 Kings 9, 9 and 10, the prophet Elisha summoned a man from the company of the prophets and said to him, "Tuck your cloak into your belt, take this flask of olive oil with you, and go to Ramoth Gilead. And when you get there, look for Jehu, son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi. Go to him, get him away from his companions, and take him into an inner room. Then take the flask and pour the oil on his head and declare, 'This is what the Lord says, I anoint you king over Israel.' Then open the door and run, don't delay." So the young prophet went to Ramoth Gilead, and when he arrived, he found the army officers sitting together. "I have a message for you, commander," he said. "For which of us?" asked Jehu. "For you, commander," he replied. Jehu got up and went into the house, and then the prophet poured the oil on Jehu's head and declared, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I anoint you king over the Lord's people Israel. You are to destroy the house of Ahab, your master, and I will avenge the blood of my servants, the prophets, and the blood of all the Lord's servants shed by Jezebel. The whole house of Ahab will perish. I will cut off from Ahab every last male in Israel, slave or free. I will make the house of Ahab like the house of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha, son of Ahijah. As Jezebel, dogs will devour her on the plot of ground at Jezreel, and no one will bury her. Then he opened the door and ran. And when Jehu went out to his fellow officers, one of them asked him, "Is everything all right? Why did this maniac come to you?" "You know the man and the sort of things he says," Jehu replied. "That's not true," they said. "Tell us." Jehu said, "Here is what he told me. This is what the Lord says, I anoint you king over Israel." They quickly took their cloaks and spread them under him on the bare steps. And then they blew the trumpet and shouted, "Jehu is king." So Jehu, son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, conspired against Joram. Now Joram and all Israel had been defending Ramoth-Gilead against Hazael, the king of Aram. But King Joram had returned to Jezreel to recover from the wounds the Arameans had inflicted on him in the battle with Hazael, king of Aram. Jehu said, "If you don't desire to make me king, don't let anyone slip out of the city to go and tell the news in Jezreel." Then he got into his chariot, and he rode to Jezreel, because Joram was resting there, and Ahaziah, king of Judah, had gone down to see him. And when the lookout, standing on the tower in Jezreel, saw Jehu's troops approaching, he called out, "I see some troops coming." "Get a horseman," Joram ordered. "Send him to meet them and ask, 'Do you come in peace?'" The horseman rode off to meet Jehu and said, "This is what the king says, 'Do you come in peace?'" "What do you have to do with peace?" Jehu replied. "Fall in behind me." The lookout reported, "The messenger has reached them, but he isn't coming back." So the king sent out a second horseman. And when he came to them, he said, "This is what the king says, 'Do you come in peace?'" Jehu again replied, "What do you have to do with peace? Fall in behind me." The lookout reported, "He has reached them, but he isn't coming back either. The driving is like that of Jehu, son of Nimshi. He drives like a maniac." Now, I thought that was interesting. He drives like a maniac. Even back then, they had people drive chariots like a maniac. "Hitch up my chariot," Joram ordered. And when it was hitched up, Joram, king of Israel, and Ahaziah, king of Judah, rode out, each in his own chariot, to meet Jehu. So they've got the two kings going out. They met him at the plot of ground that had belonged to Naboth the Jezreelite. And when Joram saw Jehu, he asked, "Have you come in peace, Jehu?" "How can there be peace," Jehu replied, "as long as all the idolatry and witchcraft of your mother Jezebel abound?" Joram turned about and fled, calling out Ahaziah, "Treachery, Ahaziah!" Then Jehu drew his bow and shot Joram between the shoulders. The arrow pierced his heart, and he slumped down in his chariot. And Jehu said to Bidkar, his chariot officer, "Pick him up and throw him on the field that belonged to Naboth the Jezreelite. Remember how you and I were riding together in chariots behind Ahab, his father, when the Lord spoke his prophecy against him. Yesterday I saw the blood of Naboth and the blood of his sons, declares the Lord, and I will surely make you pay for it on this plot of ground, declares the Lord. Now then, pick him up and throw him on that plot in accordance with the word of the Lord." And so when Ahaziah, king of Judah, saw what had happened, he fled up the road to Beth-Hagan. Jehu chased him, shouting, "Kill him too." They wounded him in his chariot on the way up to Gur, near Ibleam, but he escaped to Megiddo and died there. His servants took him by chariot to Jerusalem and buried him with his ancestors in his tomb in the city of David. In the 11th year of Joram, son of Ahab, Ahaziah had become king of Judah. Then Jehu went to Jezreel, and when Jezebel heard about it, she put on eye makeup. I don't know if it was CoverGirl or mascara or what, but they evidently had it back then too. So, but she put on eye makeup, arranged her hair, and looked out of a window. As Jehu entered the gate, she asked, "Have you come in peace, you Zimri, you murderer of your master?" He looked up at the window and called out, "Who is on my side? Who?" 2 or 3 eunuchs looked down at him. "Throw her down," Jehu said. So they threw her down, and some of her blood spattered the wall and the horses as they trampled her underfoot. Jehu went in and ate and drank. "Take care of that cursed woman," he said, "and bury her, for she was a king's daughter." But when they went out to bury her, they found nothing except her skull, her feet, and her hands. And they went back and told Jehu, who said, "This is what the word of the Lord that he spoke through his servant Elijah the Tishbite. On the plot of ground at Jezreel, dogs will devour Jezebel's flesh. Jezebel's body will be like dung on the ground in the plot at Jezreel, so that no one will be able to say, this is Jezebel." Let's continue on in verse 10, and we'll finish there. In chapter 10. Now there were in Samaria 70 sons of the house of Ahab. So Jehu wrote letters and sent them to Samaria, to the officials of Jezreel, to the elders, and to the guardians of Ahab's children. He said, "You have your master's son with you, and you have chariots and horses, a fortified city and weapons. Now as soon as this letter reaches you, choose the best and most worthy of your master's son, and set him on his father's throne. Then fight for your master's house." But they were terrified and said, "If 2 kings could not resist him, how can we?" So the palace administrator, the city governor, the elders, and the guardians sent this message to Jehu: "We are your servants, and we will do anything you say. We will not appoint anyone as king. You do whatever you think best." Then Jehu wrote them a second letter, saying, "If you are on my side and will obey me, take the heads of your master's son and come to me in Jezreel by this time tomorrow." Now the royal princes, 70 of them, were with the leading men of the city, who were rearing them. And when the letter arrived, these men took the princes and slaughtered all 70 of them. They put their heads in baskets and sent them to Jehu in Jezreel. And when the messenger arrived, he told Jehu, "They have brought the heads of the princes." Then Jehu ordered, "Put them in 2 piles at the entrance of the city gate until morning." The next morning, Jehu went out, and he stood before all the people and said, "You are innocent. It was I who conspired against my master and killed him. But who killed all of these? Know then that not a word the Lord has spoken against the house of Ahab will fail. The Lord has done what he announced through his servant Elijah." So Jehu killed everyone in Jezreel who remained at the house of Ahab, as well as all his chief men, his close friends, and his priests, leaving him no survivor. And then Jehu set out towards Samaria. At Beth-Eked of the shepherds, he met some relatives of Ahaziah, king of Judah, and asked, "Who are you?" They said, "We are relatives of Ahaziah, and we have come down to greet the families of the king and of the queen mother." "Take them alive," he ordered. So they took them alive and slaughtered them by the well of Beth-Eked, 42 of them, and he left no survivors. And he left there, and he came up upon Jehonadab, son of Rechab, who was on his way to meet him. Jehu greeted him and said, "Are you in accord with me as I am with you?" "I am," Jehonadab answered. "If so," said Jehu, "give me your hand." So he did, and Jehu helped him up into the chariot. He said, "Come with me and see my zeal for the Lord." Then he had him ride along in his chariot. And when Jehu came to Samaria, he killed all who were left there of Ahab's family. He destroyed them, according to the word of the Lord spoken to Elijah. Then Jehu brought all the people together and said to them, "Ahab served Baal a little. Jehu will serve him much. Now summon all the prophets of Baal, all his servants and all his priests." And remember, Baal was an area where they were all worshiping idols, and nothing good was going on in Baal. "And all his servants and all his priests, see that no one is missing, because I am going to hold a great sacrifice for Baal. Anyone who fails to come will no longer live." But Jehu was acting deceptively in order to destroy the servants of Baal. Jehu said, "Call an assembly in honor of Baal." So they proclaimed it. And then he sent word throughout Israel, and all the servants of Baal came. Not one stayed away. They crowded into the temple of Baal until it was full from one end to the other. And Jehu said to the keeper of the wardrobe, "Bring robes for all the servants of Baal." So he brought out robes for them. Then Jehu and Jehonadab, son of Rechab, went into the temple of Baal. Jehu looked to the servants of Baal. Look around and see that no one who serves the Lord is here with you, only servants of Baal. So they went in to make sacrifices and burnt offerings. Now Jehu had posted 80 men outside with the warning, if one of you lets any of the men I am placing in your hands escape, it will be your life for his life. As soon as Jehu had finished making the burnt offerings, he ordered the guards and officers, go in and kill them. Let no one escape. So they cut them down with the sword. The guards and officers threw the bodies out and then entered the inner shrine of the temple of Baal. They brought the sacred stone out of the temple of Baal and burned it. They demolished the sacred stone of Baal and tore down the temple of Baal, and people have used it for a latrine to this day. So Jehu destroyed Baal worship in Israel. However, he did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit, the worship of the golden calves at Bethel and Dan. The Lord said to Jehu, because you have done well in accomplishing what is right in my eyes, and have done to the house of Ahab all I had in mind to do, your descendants will sit on the throne of Israel to the 4th generation. Yet Jehu was not careful to keep the law of the Lord, the God of Israel, with all his heart. He did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, which he had caused Israel to commit. In those days, the Lord began to reduce the size of Israel. Hazael overpowered the Israelites throughout their territory, east of the Jordan, in all the land of Gilead, the region of Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh, from Aroer by the Arnon Gorge through Gilead to Bashan. As for the other servants or other events of Jehu's reign, all he did and all his achievements, are they not written in the book of annals of the kings of Israel? Jehu rested with his ancestors and was buried in Samaria, and Jehoahaz his son succeeded him as king. The time that Jehu reigned over Israel in Samaria was 28 years. So Jehu kept his anointing of king a secret. He's conspired against King Joram. He drove his chariot madly, like a maniac, to Jezreel to meet Israel's king Joram and Judah's king Ahaziah. And it took place in the very field where Ahab and Jezebel, King Joram's parents, had stolen from Naboth. If you remember back when they took that, when they took the land from him, and so Elijah tried to avenge Naboth's blood. He shot King Joram with an arrow and pursued, and then killed King Ahaziah. And so, prophecy being fulfilled, King Joram's dead body was thrown in the very plot of land that was seized from Naboth. And then when Queen Jezebel heard of her son Joram's death, she adorned herself to meet Jehu, who then ordered her death. And he continued to relentlessly slaughter the remaining family of Ahab and Joram. He tricked the prophets and the worshipers of Baal, gathered them all in, and then killed them. And so Elijah's prophecies came true. And Jehu's self, he declared himself with zeal and atrocities against the people. But through Jehu served as God's instrument of judgment in that time. And but yet his methods that he did it disregarded God's command. So Jehu would be judged for his brutalness of the people. And, we're all accountable. We're all accountable to God. In Hosea 1, verse 4, I will soon punish the house of Jehu for the massacre at Jezreel and I will put an end to the kingdom of Israel. So God allowed Israel's decline to continue during Jehu's reign, and then Jehu failed to remove, if you were noticing there, he failed to remove the calves from Bethel, and they continued to worship that. So as we go through this section tonight, you know, it's once again, a king is given, rules over the people. They think he's going to be a good king, and what the Lord wants him to do is stop worshiping idols. Stop worshiping idols and worship me. And then they don't, and God destroys them. And so we have to ask ourselves, what are our idols in life? And where judgment doesn't come from another king or a prophet in today's world, because Christ has come as the sacrifice for each of us, we are still all accountable to God, and we have to stop and check what are our idols. It may be money, it may be work, it may be, you name it. It may be pride, but we have to watch ourselves as far as what we begin to put as importance over our love and our worship for God. Next week we'll move into further on in 2 Kings, a little bit more into 2 Chronicles, and we'll see where the lineage of David gets down to just a real, to one person before it starts up again, and which God, despite his anger with the Israelites, he kept his promises that from the seed of Abraham there would be that all nations would be blessed. And Israel gets big, Israel gets small, Israel gets real small, and then it begins to grow. So we'll work on studying on that next week. Let's close in prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you so much